Ladies and gentlemen, we've done it! The final mailbag before the opening game week of the 2025 season is packed with questions exclusively about the upcoming season. It's a fresh start, leaving behind the debates over house settlements, NIL clearinghouses, and CFP formats. How often does the national championship race open up like this? It's a rare sight indeed. Over decades of watching college football, I can't recall a time when so many teams had a legitimate shot at the title. This year, I'm counting around 10 potential contenders. Anonymous. Each week, I ask readers to include their city in their submissions. It never occurred to me that I should also remind them to include their name. Thanks for pointing that out. You're absolutely right. This year feels like an unusually open field, right from the top of the preseason AP poll. No. 1. Texas with 25 first-place votes and number 2 Penn State with 23 are separated by just 5 points, the closest margin since 1998. 6 teams earned first-place votes: Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, 11, Clemson, 4, Georgia, 1, and Oregon, 1. This is the most since 2016, when there were 7. But here's where it gets controversial. 2016 was in the midst of the Alabama-Clemson dominance. Those teams had just faced each other in the national title game the previous year. However, Alabama's quarterback situation was uncertain, and Clemson's dynasty was just beginning. Alabama received 33 first-place votes, Clemson 16, and the rest were split among Oklahoma, FSU, LSU, Ohio State, and Michigan. Back then, Alabama was still the powerhouse, and most people assumed they'd be number 1 every year. Now, Steve Sarkisian's Texas program isn't inspiring that level of confidence yet. Even I, who've been supporting Penn State since January, am doing so with reservations. In the 11-year history of the CFP, no team outside the preseason top 6 has won the championship. Yet, my list of potential winners is 10 deep: Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Notre Dame, Oregon, Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M. A dark horse that ranks 4th in Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio, 82%. Some of these teams will inevitably miss the playoff, and none are without their doubts. But in terms of talent, the gap between number 1 Texas and number 9 LSU is much smaller than it was in 2016 between number 1 Alabama and number 9 Tennessee. Alabama beat Tennessee 49-10 that season, a stark contrast to LSU's recent performance. Stu, with both the AP and coaches preseason polls out, which top 10 team is most likely to finish unranked, and which unranked team is most likely to finish in the top 10? Nicholas R. Thanks, Nicholas. The preseason wouldn't be complete without this question. Whoever I pick for the first one, their fans will be upset. No one believes their preseason top 10 team could finish unranked. According to my colleague Ralph Russo, an average of 1.7 teams per season fall out of the rankings. Last year, number 9 Michigan, 8-5, and number 10 Florida State, 2-10, both did. My top candidate this season is number 7 Oregon. There's a lot of faith in QB Dante Moore, a 5-star recruit who struggled as a true freshman at UCLA in 2023. We assume he'll improve, but what if he doesn't? Dan Lanning is 35-6 through 3 seasons, and I have no doubt that Tulane transfer running back Maki Hughes will shine. However, Lanning is relying heavily on several other transfers, including offensive lineman Isaiah World, Nevada, and Emmanuel Pregnon, USC, and defensive tackle Bear Alexander, USC, who are hyped but not guaranteed success. For the unranked team likely to finish in the top 10, I'm looking at the Big 12. Utah could be this year's Arizona State. After 3 straight double-digit win seasons, Kyle Whittingham's team slipped to 8-5 and 5-7 the past 2 years. With a new offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, and QB Devin Dampier, the Utes have the potential to reinvent their offense. If Morgan Scalley's defense remains strong, Utah could challenge for the Big 12 title. Number 17 Kansas State versus number 22 Iowa State in Dublin is the first Week 0 game between ranked opponents since 2000. Why is it flying under the radar nationally? Aaron M. Those early season games bring back memories of the high-profile kickoff, pigskin, Eddie Robinson classics. The last big Week 0 game I remember was in 2004, when number 1 USC faced Virginia Tech in Washington, D.C., and Reggie Bush caught 3 touchdowns. These games disappeared when the NCAA adopted a permanent 12-game schedule in 2005, and Week 0 didn't return until 2016 with Cal Hawaii in Australia. To be blunt, it's flying under the radar because it's not a Big Ten or SEC game. K-State and Iowa State are solid programs but lack the national brand recognition of those conferences. Most college football fans are already looking ahead to Week 1 games, like Texas at Ohio State. However, come kickoff on August 23rd, I suspect many will realize there's a great game on. This game could be pivotal for the Big 12 title race. The loser will have little room for error, especially if the two schools end up in a tiebreaker situation. For a Big 12 team aiming for the CFP, winning the conference is crucial. Penn State hasn't had such high preseason expectations in over a quarter century. How do Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State fans handle this pressure regularly? Kanu from Philly. It's not the expectations that are challenging. It's the despair when they're not met. Georgia fans in particular endured 40 years of disappointment between Herschel Walker and Stetson Bennett. I imagine a lot of bourbon helped. Stuart, who is your SEC dark horse? Franklin. I may have hinted at this in my national champions answer, but it's Texas A&M. While some might pick the Aggies for the CFP, they were projected to finish 8th in the SEC at conference media days. 11 schools got at least one vote to win the championship, but Texas A&M wasn't among them. Mike Elko's team had a chance to clinch a spot in the championship last year and led the SEC in scoring in conference games. Despite finishing 8-5, A&M overachieved in Elko's first season. They returned the most production, 71%, in the SEC. According to ESPN's Bill Connolly, QB Marcel Reed, a dual-threat sophomore, has the potential to be special. He showed promise against Florida, LSU, and Auburn, but struggled against South Carolina, Texas, and in the bowl game against USC. If Reed improves as a passer, the Aggies could dominate offensively. They return key players on both sides of the ball, including Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels, and Reuben Owens. However, the defense, particularly the D-line, needs to step up after losing several key players to the draft. Texas A&M faces a crucial test at Notre Dame in Week 3. A blowout loss could derail their CFP hopes. In conference play, they visit LSU and Texas, but get Florida and South Carolina at home, and miss Georgia and Alabama. Overall, their path is manageable. Just saw the headline on The Athletic. Submit a question for Stuart Mandel's College Football Playoff. Congrats on purchasing the naming rights to the playoff. Brad P. Thanks, Brad. It was a brain fart. Not a sponsorship deal. What 3 teams have the best shot from the group of 5 of making the playoff? Jim S. Jim, you're our resident G5 enthusiast. First, there's Boise State. Despite losing Ashton Jeanty, Sire Gaines showed promise last year before an ankle injury. QB Maddox Madsen, receiver Latrell Caples, and tight end Matt Lauder are back, along with a strong defense. However, a tough early season game against Notre Dame could test their mettle. Next, Tulane is a strong contender. Coach John Sumrall secured BYU transfer Jake Retzlaff at QB, and while the offense may not be as explosive, the defense could be outstanding. They face P4 competition against Northwestern, Duke, and Ole Miss. James Madison is also intriguing. QB Alonzo Barnett and running backs Ayo Adeyi and George Pettaway return, and the Dukes have a favorable schedule, with games against Louisville, Liberty, and Washington State. While these 3 are strong candidates, the G5 landscape is unpredictable due to frequent personnel changes. Boise State stands out as the most stable and is best positioned to become a regular CFP participant. Do you think the preseason top 25 should be viewed as an expectation of where teams are in Week 1, where they will be by season's end, or a mix of the two? Adam Z. Every voter has a different approach. When I voted in the AP poll, I treated the preseason ballot as a starting point, assessing where teams stood based on returning players, key freshmen, and transfers. It's impossible to predict how teams will evolve over the season. Ralph, a first-time voter this year, takes a similar approach. He doesn't consider schedules or project wins and losses. Ranking Penn State ahead of Ohio State now doesn't mean he expects Penn State to win in November. It's a snapshot of where teams stand going into the season. I do predictions, and there are often discrepancies between my preseason top 25 and my predicted standings. This is because I analyze schedules, looking for potential upsets, long travel, and short weeks. But even with this level of detail, preseason rankings are increasingly guesswork, especially for teams outside the top tier. Hypothetically speaking, a team goes 0-10 over its first 10 games, but just happens to play teams ranked 1 through 10. Furthermore, said team loses every game by 1 point. In Game 11, it beats the 11th ranked team by 21 points. Are they the 11th strongest team in the country? Should they be ranked number 11? Should they be ranked at all? Should they make the 12-team CFP? Donald B. This scenario is mind-bending, but the team would likely be too focused on finding a new coach rather than worrying about rankings. The CFP committee would have a lot to consider, but such a record would be unprecedented and challenging to evaluate.